We got day 2, and it's all about CSS. I want to start off today by actually showing off the workshop right away. So if you see kind of the requirements of what you're going to have to do today, kind of will frame what your mind thinks you need to absorb, right? So we have day 2 CSS basics is the name of the workshop. The workshops are all going to follow from here on out. I know day 1 was a little different. From here on out, they're going to all follow a similar requirement. There's going to be a website already built for you or some functionality, and you're just going to have to recreate it. That's really going to be the pattern going forward. So here we're going to make a clone of this demo day 2 workshop, and really simple, really ugly, but there is some weird styling that you're going to have to do to make a successful clone of this site. But yeah, so I'm going to leave it up to you too. I really dislike boilerplate. So I don't think there's ever boilerplate in any of these assignments. Everything you're creating from scratch. So there'll be a lot of flexibility of how you accomplish this. But this is going to be the assignment today to get it as exact as possible to this very ugly Game of Thrones website. So we're going to talk about CSS, but I thought maybe we could just recap day 1 just a little bit. So when I go to Amazon.com at a high level, what did I say is kind of happening? In very plain English, kind of explain like I'm 5 language, what's going on there. Gang, do you remember or have any intuition there?
Is it the browser will display the HTML of the website?
Yeah. So my computer talking to Amazon's computer, 2 computers connecting, and then Amazon is sending me HTML. And the HTML, remember, is just kind of like text, but we hate the way just regular text looks, right? Just a block of text. So we use HTML to mark it up to make it look way more readable and nice. And then, of course, there's a lot of complexity on top of that. But that's kind of the mental model we're working with right now. So then the question is, well, what is CSS, right? What is CSS's role? So for CSS, we have cascading style sheets. And like its name implies, it also is going to be just about the way the website looks. So kind of like HTML, we had some of those special elements that did more than just make text look different. Can we think of any examples of those kind of elements that had more complexity to them than just your normal P tag? Alex? Oh, sorry, Alexander?
Can you repeat the question again?
Yeah, so our mental model of HTML is like we want to decorate text to make it look a little better. And then we were saying, well, there's some elements we used yesterday that have more complexity than just that. They do more than just make text look good. Do you remember any of those elements?
I think I need a refresher.
Yeah, so open to the class. Yeah, Renata had her hand up.
Is it strong in emphasis?
Well, those actually do just kind of change the look of the text, right? They just make it bold or italic. So not those I'm
Image,
thinking.
anchor tags.
Anchor
Yeah,
tags.
yeah. The two I'm thinking of, image. Image does way more than just make text look different, right? It actually sends another, this is getting in the weeds, but it sends another request to the server, downloads an image, and then displays an image, which obviously isn't text. So a lot of complexity there. And then the anchor tag, that's not just changing the look of text, that's doing functionality. But CSS, we're taking a step back and we're just now concerned how it looks again. So the website, I like to show off the power of CSS, if you will. CSS Zen Garden. So here is a website with some HTML, right? And then here's another website. And it's the same website. It's the same HTML. The only thing difference is the styling. So same exact words, everything. Let's see if there's a better one. That's kind of ugly too. Anyway, the point is these are all the same websites, just different. That's kind of cool, I guess, maybe for like an art museum. The point is the power of CSS is really strong, right? To make different websites. I think my favorite one was Apothecary, maybe. Yeah. And you can see it here, right? The beauty of CSS design, the beauty of CSS design. Same website, same HTML, different CSS. So, we are convinced that we want to use CSS because it's very powerful to make our website look good. So let's use it, right? Our first objective for the day, here's our Chrome window. And in our Chrome, let's recreate day one, right? Where we said hello world, but here we'll just say day two, nice and big. So I want to make a new website that just says day two. Does anyone remember the steps? Like, how can I kind of bootstrap just a brand new HTML website and get it running? What are my steps? Kevin, do you remember any of the steps I would need to do?
Yeah, use a text editor.
Yeah,
and,
so we're going to use VS
put the
Code.
documentation.
Yeah. So our code editor is VS Code for sure. And then here I have some old projects open. But I'm going to go ahead and go to File, Open Folder. And then I'm in my directory code, so that's good. But I'm going to make a new directory here. I'm just going to call it day two because that's what you guys are going to probably do. But again, I'm not going to micromanage that kind of organization. I'm going to select the folder. And then I know I'm good when I have this blank folder in VS Code. What's my next step, Ryan?
You make a index.html and then put the exclamation point at the top and hit return.
Yeah, I don't use the exclamation, but I'm guessing it's exactly the same as just typing HTML. So we have our nice boilerplate. So Chrome doesn't have to guess at what we're doing. We're telling Chrome we're using HTML version 5 and what encoding we're using and to make it mobile ready. So we're all ready to just go. And remember, there were way too many people that didn't have Prettier installed and working. So remember, every time you press save, I need to see it shift like that and your code look error-free and all formatted. If you don't have that, ask your breakout roommates to help, and then ask me, because I want everybody on the same page. The biggest single hiccup we had yesterday by far, and I should have mentioned this and stressed this because this is, something new students do every single time. Write 1 or 2 lines of code, save it, make sure Prettier likes it. If it doesn't, do not continue writing code because it becomes so hard to bug when we're building on top of this shaky foundation. So please, few lines of code, make sure there's no bugs. Do not continue if there's any bugs at all. Address the bugs. Okay, so how do I get day 2 to show up in my website all big and nice? Victor?
Use H1 header.
Yeah, awesome. So I'm going to say day 2, and I press save, and I don't see anything in Chrome here, Victor. Do you remember how I can kind of load this HTML in a nice way so that it continuously runs in Chrome?
I do not remember. Sorry.
Yeah, no worries.
I know it
Daniel?
has to do with
You want to run it on live server?
Yeah, so how do I do that?
Yep. Right click on the file and open with live server.
Yeah, awesome. And remember, live server is what enables us to not have to manually press refresh every single time. And that's it. We recreated day 1, right? Without some of the tags. And again, if anyone's not here with their setup, with Prettier and live server working really well, I really want you to be, and I want you to message me asking for help. I think I only had 2 questions the entire day from you guys. My whole job here is to help you. So please don't be as shy as you were yesterday. Unless your group mates were just really assisting you wonderfully. But there were a lot of questions after class, and I'd rather shift it to during class if that's possible. Anyway, here we have day 2. So objective done, right? But we're going to switch this objective. And now I actually just want a box. I want a box to show up in my browser. We haven't specifically done something like this or talked about this, so it's a little tricky. So I'll open it up to the class. Who has any ideas how we can just get a square box to show up? Small, medium-sized box.
I feel like I remember seeing something about a box element.
There's no box element. Well, every element is a box element, which we're going to talk about. But
input?
yeah,
Is it input?
It could be input, but I'm going to hold off on input.
I'll make a div, a parent div, and then make a child div.
We don't need the child, but let's start at the div.
Oh, okay.
So div stands for division. It's an element that has no visibility by itself. But through the beauty of styling, we can make anything look any way we want to look. So this div element exists. We can see it in our elements here. It's right here, but it has no width, it has no height, it has no style. So how can we apply some styling to this div to make it look like a little box?
Add a class.
Yeah, I heard add a class. We can absolutely do that. What should we call the class?
Box.
Yeah, good name. Okay, so now a couple of things are going on. So in CSS, we can target elements many different ways. In different ways, I'll just put, because I don't actually know how many, but we'll talk about the most popular ways. We can do this by classes. So we give any element we want a class name, and then we are able to target it. But also I need to talk about how do we apply CSS styling to the HTML, or even to element, well, to the HTML really. And here there's 3 different ways. And the first way is to use a style tag. And that's the way I want to do right now. So can anyone help me out with that? How can I use a style tag to target this box class? And the hint is it's going to be somewhere in the head here.
You put a style element?
Yeah, so we have a special tag called style. And this does way more than just make text look different, right? Now we can actually use a different kind of language, the language of CSS. And now here we can try to target this div. But to target classes, there's a special rule. We have to add a dot before the name. This is kind of weird. It's kind of tricky. So here, to target this div, we would actually have to say what?
Could it be just point box?
Dot box. And then the format is we use curly braces. And now we decide what properties we want for our box. So again, we're just trying to get a little box to show up. What CSS properties do we need to get a div, this div visible?
Height and width.
Yeah, so let's give it a height is a CSS property. And here, what I'm going to encourage you to use and what is the default measurement is going to be pixels. And you'll get a feel for how big or small these are. The real, sometimes most of the confusion, or a big source of confusion, is the number of options and the number of ways you can have like different units of measurement in CSS is way too many. Like there's so many different ones. There's rems, ems, percentages, probably ones I'm forgetting right now. So let's all just, the real kind of standard that the community has kind of settled on is pixels. And modern browsers have really done a good job of changing devices and resolutions to look good if we as developers use pixels. So that's kind of, I'm going to encourage you to use it as our standard. In the past, supposedly 1 pixel was actually 1 pixel. I don't think that was probably ever true on a technical level, and it's definitely not true today. So yeah, a little background. So height and width, I heard. So let's do 50 pixels here. And then I'm kind of confused, so I don't see anything still.
We need border.
Yeah, so the final thing we need to see to make our element visible, we could do border. There's actually another property we could do. Does anyone know?
Background?
Yeah, we could do a background color. And then it shows up. Another thing I want to talk about, by default, does anyone notice something strange with this browser and the way this box looks? It's not centered? No, that's actually not strange. The that's the normal flow. Your elements will start at the very top when you're making
has a margin.
Yeah, I didn't ask for any margin here, yet there's margin here. So this is annoying. I don't know why this decision was made and all developers reset it, so to speak. So we want to reset this kind of default styling. So for that, we use an asterisk, a wildcard, which targets all elements. And we say margin 0 pixels. And we get rid of that. It's kind of annoying, but it's just kind of boilerplate homework we need to do. So we did our objective, right? We got a red box and we targeted it using a CSS class selector. But I want to make another box. And I want this one to be blue. And instead of I don't want to use a class. I want to target it in another way. And I leave it up to you guys how. But what do you think? How else can we target an element? Hara?
You mean the box element or?
No, I want to make a new box that's blue beneath the red box. So how can we target line 20 element?
I'll give it another class name.
We could, but I said I don't want to use class anymore.
Oh, okay.
Because we have different ways.
You can add an element like UL or LI and then target the selector.
I could, or I could just target it directly with the selector, right?
Yes.
How would I do that?
Your ID.
ID is something else. Let's do ID. That's fine. ID, what's a good name for this one?
Blue box.
Sure. Yeah. And then, okay, so we have another another weirdness. Where's my, so here, the other way we can target is with IDs. And here the weirdness is we have to use a hashtag, if I can find it. We have to add hashtag before name. So here, if we want to target this div with an ID of blue box, how could I do that, Renata?
Okay, so you would just do a dot?
No,
oh, sorry.
We want this
one.
Right
here? Yes.
Yeah.
Okay, in the style, sorry, we're applying the CSS to it right now?
Yeah, the CSS to the div with ID blue box.
Okay, I can't remember. I think, so is it the hash? So you're just doing the hash blue dash box?
Exactly, yeah.
Yeah.
So hash blue box. So this
right.
is kind of weird. Yeah, go ahead.
Oh, and then the curly brace and then change the background color to blue.
Right. Beautiful. So that's kind of strange, right? The dot for classes and the hashtag for IDs. So those are two ways we can target selectors, but there's more ways. So I want another div and I want this one to be green. How can I target this in a way we haven't targeted yet?
Inline.
Yeah, we could do inline. How would I do that? Whoever shouted it out. Or Sydney, how? Actually, I don't think we ever did styling, but do you know how to style inline, Sydney?
Yeah, it's style and then like equal, yeah, and then background color green. Or would you just do color green? No, because color would be text, but background color green.
But then the problem is we don't see anything. Why don't we see anything, Sydney?
Because we don't have any like height or width defined.
Yeah. And in this situation, we're kind of repeating ourselves here. Is there something that would actually make sense so we could target all the divs?
Yeah, just do div.
Yeah, so this is a really important selector. This is called an element selector. So here we have an element selector. And the cool thing is we don't use any special name, just put the name of the element. So it's kind of nice. So here, like Sydney was saying, all we say is div, and it actually targets all three of these. So here, I can remove this height and width from this and put it in the div. And now I don't need it here because a div already has that styling applied. And then we see the three boxes, even though we didn't actually specifically give any of these width and height. So that's another selector we can do. And I think that's the final one I actually want to cover: element selectors, classes, and IDs. Let me pause there. What questions are there on CSS so far? Okay. So before I mentioned that every element is treated like a box. So we have the box model of CSS. And then I can just, every element is a box. So here, it doesn't matter what we have, a paragraph tag in H1, it's all treated like a box. Inside is the content. In between the content and the border is what's referred to as padding. And we can actually play around with that. So let's actually look at padding because that's going to be important. So let's expand. Let's say I want to expand the padding of the red box by 50 pixels. How could I do that? The effect is that it's actually going to be bigger in this case. Yeah. How could I do that? How can I give the red box 50 padding? Monica?
You would use the padding tag within the box.
Yeah. So this is going to be called a CSS property. Yep. And then here I can put 50 pixels. And two things kind of feel like they're conflicting in my mind now. Does anyone have a guess what? This might be a little tricky, but for some reason, this feels like it's conflicting with this. Does anyone know why? To me.
Is it because it adds on to like the height?
Yeah. In one situation, I'm saying all divs should be this size. But then in another situation, I'm saying, well, I want this like smaller part of it to be big. And let's make it even bigger to be ridiculous, right? So this is being like ignored in a sense, right? It's being overridden. There's a lot of this kind of battling of different CSS properties that goes on. And the winner is always what's more specific. So here, so that's a general rule of CSS that's important. When there's conflicting styles, the more specific wins. So with that in mind, if I make the background color of all the divs yellow and press save, who thinks all the boxes will change? Who thinks none of them will change? Who thinks one will change? Okay, let's see, right? So none of them have changed because it turns out this is more specific, a class selector, than an element selector. This is way more specific, the ID. And the inline style is like the most specific. So they all lose. But of course, if I now delete this property from our .box class, what will our first box look like, Francis? What will the color of that first box be?
Yellow.
Correct. So yellow won the war because there's no conflict. No one else is telling it what color it should be. And this can get very tricky sometimes with so many different things overlapping. But that's called specificity. This is also called kind of inheritance. All these elements are inheriting from this property as well. Let me pause there. Any questions thus far on any of that? Okay. So I said how this is kind of conflicting with this, and then we went on a tangent about specificity. But so when I put padding 150 here and height width 50-50, this should kind of be ignored because I'm saying what my height and width should be. So here, another kind of default styling that a lot of developers do is called box sizing, border box. And in this case, it actually doesn't do what I was hoping it did. In this case, what it does is include the size of the border. So if your element has a border, like if we put a solid black border on our box here, our first box, let me make that even bigger. Do you see how when I increase the border, the box doesn't increase its total size? If I don't have this box sizing border box, I believe it will. So another kind of default that I think you should put in your CSS is this box sizing border box. It just makes more logical sense to me that, yeah, your border should be included in like your total element size, right? But unfortunately, if you put padding, it will override that, as we saw. So you still have to be somewhat conscious of that. Another very important CSS property is I want some space in between these boxes. I want some space in between these boxes. How can I do that, Roman?
You can give it some margin.
Yeah, where? I want to target all the boxes.
In the div.
Yeah, so if I use my element selector, and what can I type here?
Margin, colon, I guess 50 px and
well, 50 is a lot, but sure. And there we go. We have some space now in between our boxes. And the margin's applying to top, right, bottom, left. but you can control that if you want individually. So then in our box model, let's go ahead and take a look at the box model in more detail. So here, Chrome is actually showing us the box model, right? We have the inner content. Well, actually, in this case, it's the entire thing is 50 by 50 pixels. And here, we're actually looking at this blue box right now. Oh, let me switch it to look at the yellow. The yellow is more interesting. So here, we have the inner box is 30.8 pixels. And the border is 9.6, which is weird, right? Because we said 10 pixels. I'm actually not sure why that discrepancy is there. It's kind of interesting. But anyway, the margin it shows us too in this box model is 50 on each side, 50 pixels. And this is what Chrome does to every element. So it has a content, it has padding, it has a border, and it has how much space it gets between every other element. Any questions on the box model here? And we can play, well, I think that's kind of the box model. Okay, another important concept in the world of CSS is block versus inline elements. So for block elements, it's as if a line break is added automatically. So what do we think about, so every element is one or the other, block or inline. So what do we think divs are? Are they block or inline? Aaron, what do you think a div is by default?
Block.
A block, correct. So we have divs, our block. And Aaron, can you think of anything that you think is inline?
Not off the top of my head.
That's fine. Yeah. So let me actually write a p tag and say, what are some inline elements? And then let's take a look at the p tag. What do we think about that? Is that block or, well, it's kind of a little hard to tell yet because we don't have another one, but let me just duplicate it. So what do we think the p element, is it block or inline, Jazz?
Block.
Yeah, so we have another block element. So we have divs, p. I'll just put div here. But Jazz, can you think of some inline element?
Span.
Yeah, our biggest one is going to be span, right? But here, I can't prove to you that span is inline because I can't see it. So how can I get that span to show up? What should we make it? Let's make them red boxes, right? Let's make them small. Let's make them 20 pixel red boxes. Lizzie, help me out with that. How can we target those span elements to apply some styling?
Would you put span up under style?
Mm-hmm.
And let's see. And then your curly brackets.
Braces, yep.
Braces. And you said you wanted to make it red?
Sure, I want little red boxes.
So would you have to first do the height and the width?
Yeah. Still nothing showing up.
And a color?
We can try color and do red. Yeah, there you go. And I just showed you because I always get tricked on that too. Oh, this is a real source of confusion. So I'm glad this came up. If you want to resize some inline elements, you have to change their display to be the most confusing naming possible, inline block. By default, you can't easily change their sizing because they're not used to being changed. So you have to override it. And I know the naming is horribly confusing. So for the span, we actually have to set its display to basically say, let me change you with inline block. And now I believe we'll be able to see it. Yeah. Really annoying though. And the naming couldn't be worse. So span is an inline element. What did we talk about yesterday? We talked about images, right? What are images? First off, how can I get an image to appear? I want just an image of a box. I know this is a little boring, but so I'm going to save this image into my local directory here. Code, day 2. So first things first, just in HTML, CSS aside, how do I get the image that I just downloaded to show up? Zach, help me out.
With an image tag.
Yeah, very nice. And then how do I point it? What attribute is required?
The relative link inside the directory.
Yeah, the attribute name is source and the value is going to be this relative link. Yep. Okay, so let me paste this a few more times and then I'll ask Zach what, I think I was wrong yesterday on this too. If you guys are taking notes, I'm pretty sure I was wrong. What are images? Are they block or span? Are they block or inline?
Inline block.
Yeah, they're actually inline block, which maybe was my confusion. I'll go with that. Images are inline. So these we can resize without doing the weird display inline block. So how can I want these boxes to be way smaller. How can I make them way smaller, Ronald?
Just use the image tag selector and then add a CSS rule for the width and height to, I'm not sure what we've decided on, 100 pixels or 50 pixels. Yeah, that's fine. And then height of 50. Yeah.
Yeah, very nice. Okay, so images are inline, span is inline. Span is really useful when you want to apply styling to like one word in a paragraph or a span. What else? What other classes, IDs we hit? Oh, font size we can do. So that one's not too difficult. Let's just say I want this really big for whatever reason, because I'm excited that spans are inline elements. How can I make this p tag really big? Rodrigo. Just a reminder, you guys can hold spacebar to unmute too.
Oh, yeah. Could it be Size.
So first things first, in CSS, we have to target the element we want to
Okay.
apply the styling. So the first objective, how do we target that line 42 P element?
Would it be with the P tag?
Yeah, we can use an element
curly
selector.
brackets. Yeah.
And then we want to increase the size of the font size.
Does size work?
I don't think size works. We can try. No. Close though. Do you need some help?
Yeah, please.
Okay. Kim, what CSS property can we use?
Font size?
Yes. Font size. And here we'll go crazy. This is actually a good bug. So Kim, what is my bug and why did that happen?
I don't know. I think it's your margins, like for how you have the.
Let me step back for 1 second. So I said that I want just this element. I didn't use the word just, but I'm using it now. I said I want this element to be big. But when I did...
Because you didn't address... It's going to do every P you have in there because you didn't...
So how can I fix that bug?
You could give it a class, each P.
I could give it a class, sure. Well, let's just do the one I want to change. So what can I do here? I'll give it a class. What's a good name? This is honestly the hardest part of CSS, in my opinion. I hate naming these classes. What do you think, Kim? What's a good name?
I don't know, span line?
Sure. And then how can I select it, Alex? And this is, remember, it's classes, so it's a little tricky. How can I select it?
I'm not sure if you're calling on me or the other one.
Sorry. Alex Robinson. I want to select, go ahead.
You just do the div with the name?
No, not, this is line 44 is what I want to target to make big. So it's not a div. And we ran into trouble when we used P, but now we gave it a class name. How do I use this class name to target it?
Just the hashtag sign and then the span line?
Close. Hashtag is for IDs, and we have a class.
Dot.
Yeah. We're going to use the dot for classes. So here we do span line, font size, whatever. Doesn't matter. Yeah. So that's font size. And then we just have, we already did padding. Oh, I guess we could. So, so David, I want this sentence to be purple. This whole sentence right here. So I want to target line 48, that P tag. But that's the only one I want to be purple. How can I do that?
You can give it a class name, that line 40, and just call it purple. Class equal to purple.
Yeah. And then how can I apply this class?
Then just do a class selector dot purple, and then your curly braces. And then you can just say color purple, actually, to make the font purple.
Awesome. And then it's hard to see a little bit, but the color is purple. And then David, how do I change the look of the font? How do I change the type of font?
I'm going to guess that it's a font type property.
Yeah, that's always awesome. You start typing and then see what VS Code suggests to you, and then you'll know, right? So from these options, what do you think? Well, it's
Font
kind of
family.
a little, yeah, it's going to be font family. And then here you can select whatever you want. I don't remember what I used to build the demo, but you'll be able to try to match it. So anyway, we can change to any font that you like. If you go really crazy, you can download custom fonts from Google and stuff, but I wouldn't recommend that today. So I think we covered all the most basic CSS kind of selectors and rules and properties, at least enough to get you going. So yeah. What questions are there on anything?
Can you talk about how margins overlap? Like if you were to increase the size, like if you increase the margin on block elements, then it actually overlap each other.
So these, if we increase the margin of any of these, I don't think they will overlap. I think it'll just go down or make room.
So in the video, I talked about how when margins overlap, it goes with the largest size margin, the space between block elements. Does that sound familiar at all to anybody?
There's definitely situations that occur when things conflict, and the more specific usually will win. I don't specifically remember what kind of collision happens when two things want different margins, but we can play around with it a bit. So, something I could show you is if there's some situations where you just want margin on one side. So here, I could want that blue box to be a little bit more to the right. So I could apply margin left of 50 pixels. And then why is this not doing anything? Did I take away blue box?
Because I think you already have a 50 pixels as the margin for everything. So you might need to.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, you might need to make it bigger. So make it like 100 or something.
Okay. Oh, that's kind of interesting. So it's not like adding to this because these are now conflicting. It's ignoring it. No, it's not ignoring it. It's only ignoring it, I bet, on the left. So if we do this less than the 50, which this gives it, I think this will win and it'll only be 30. So we'll see it more to the left. Yeah. You see that collision there? This wants 50 pixels on the left, but this is more specific and it's saying I only want 30 actually. So that's a good example of a conflict and who wins because of specificity.
So on the yellow box and on the blue box, if on the yellow box you give a margin bottom of say 20, and the blue box a margin top of I don't know, 30, the distance between the yellow and the blue should be 50, right?
I think it'll add. So our yellow box, we don't have a specific selector for. So let's do the blue and green.
I think he's talking about collapsing margin, and that only applies in block context.
What's that?
The higher one will only effectively to.
You're breaking up, Sarthak. You're still breaking up a bit. Give me 1 second. Let me target this. Where are our boxes, first of all? Oh, classic equals. Oh, this is confusing naming. So let's call this yellow box, right? Yeah. Let's call that yellow box. And then here I'm going to change it to yellow box. Sorry, I think I got confused with that. So here, if we say margin like bottom of 100 pixels, but on our blue box, we said we only want the margin top to be 30 pixels. Do you see how I think it adds it? They both kind of get their way.
Is there a way, can we open the inspector to see?
Yeah, of course. So the first element is saying 100, which is confusing. Oh, never mind. Look at the sides here. Yeah. Sorry. So at the sides here, this margin is 50, but it's showing us 100 because if we go to this blue, the margin at the top is just 30.
You've got a bottom margin on the yellow box for 100 pixels.
Okay. Margin bottom. So it's, wait, so is it ignoring the margin top of the?
The margin collapsed, I think is,
yeah.
Ronald, did you say that, Ronald? I think it was Ronald who said that.
Yeah, it's only, this is only relevant for like when you use block context. Right. It's just some phenomenon with like when things are touching, they all like the padding kind of bleeds through as well. There's just weird nuances on that.
Yeah.
But like once you do display flex and block, we don't have to really worry about that. But that's just
which is tomorrow.
Margin is bigger, it's always gonna engulf the smaller one. But this is only for the elements that are like on top of each other. There's no collapsing margin for things that are like to the left and right of each other. It's only for top and bottom.
So I was totally wrong, or my mental model on this specific like conflict was totally wrong. I thought they would always add in this situation, and it looks like no, the bigger one has won, I think. So yeah, CSS can get weird for sure. And complicated quickly with all these different competing kind of styling. Any more questions on that?
I do have a question, but just more about specificity.
Yeah.
Can't pronounce it. I'm just curious, like, because I've noticed just with styling, it's better to always do your styling on a class or ID. Do you agree with that versus an element? Because I know I've had issues in the past where I would do it, say, for example, on a footer, and then things would conflict and it would get pretty messy.
So I've heard just kind of informally that classes are the most preferred. I definitely have used IDs, classes. The only thing that most people agree is not best practice is using inline styling. And then you're kind of combining your HTML and your styling, and it's just better to have them in separate sheets. So that's the one kind of consensus. You'll use both IDs and classes. There's no best practice situation for that. Yeah.
But I just mean, like, for example, if you had a footer and you didn't have a class and just like to do your styling on that, like, I think that's like not good to do that. Like, just you should always put a class or an ID.
Possibly, but there's definitely situations where you're going to use an element selector and it'll be appropriate, in my opinion, at least. I've definitely used them before in projects. Yeah, I don't think there's a consensus that it's almost always bad to use inline styling. Some people will disagree with that as well, although that's more of a consensus. I think element selectors aren't frowned upon. There's definitely situations where they can be used appropriately. But maybe in some situations, well, we saw a situation right here where it wasn't appropriate, right? We were applying styling where we didn't want to apply styling. So we saw a situation where it wasn't the best option for us. Okay, so day 2 is open. Let me stop sharing here. And let me stop
I
recording.
do have a question real quick. Do you
Yeah,
want
go
us
ahead.
to apply our styles on the top of the sheet as you showed